when it comes to our movements around intimacy and how to organize relationship. The interesting thing about sort of both poles of that is that it's based, if you think about it, it's based on either Puritanism or licentiousness, right? And they're both actually control mechanisms. And, because you need a degree of control in order to have a civilization. I mean, let's just look at it plainly, right? You need to have some degree of let's soften it and say guidelines, right? But ultimately, if those guidelines can easily become dogmatic in either pole of the relationship wars right now, let's say. And so how that works is, and they both use the term freedom, and how that works is that, in the Puritanism camp, an extreme, obviously it's like the trad wife movement, TPUSA, all that, they use the idea of religious freedom and the correct kind of feminine way to be, right? And then in the licentiousness crowd is the tantra crowd and the sacred, let's say, intimacy crowd. So they, of course, are screaming from the rooftops. It's about freedom and intimacy and freedom of choice and all that, and they're just nothing like the Puritanism crowd, right? So I call BS because that's a lot of the crowd that I experienced, and really was destructive, just as destructive as sort of the opposite pole, which is what I grew up with as a child, and all the shame and all that goes along with that. And they're both control mechanisms. Yeah, I'll go further into detail. So how do they control? The first method is both of them equally control through just being obsessed with, again, we're going to call it intimacy. That obsession is your focus. That's like the greatest, as you know, like from just looking at politics today, the whole game is around where is your focus. So when you have your focus on intimacy per se, that absolutely controls you. And as much as like the guys might want to say, oh, well, you reach a certain age and like that focus is just absolutely natural. And I know because that's what I experienced. I question that simply because not all cultures have been so, let's call it egg-jewelized as we have. We are an extremely egg-jewelized culture. So just to sum up there, that obsessive focus is a control mechanism. Another example of that is, and you can see it even in males now, but in my generation, Generation X, well, for many generations actually, you could see, especially in the women, where the focus on your body and your body as your value. I can speak very much from experience, but there have been plenty of studies around this that also show that, when your focus is there as your value, it's almost like your brain is sort of shut off to other aspects that are meaningful and create value for you, and striving, right? So you're really focused in again on your body shape, and how you feel about yourself is formed around that. How you present yourself to the world, and how you interact with others is all based around this sort of almost competitive presentation. That's all outer, right? So it has very little to do with inner actual value of what you can offer the world, or just perception of the world in general. Just you're really stuck, let's say, psychologically. And you can see that now in men as well as looks maxing and all that is starting to come into value for men because they are losing their value because of what corporations have done, which is eliminate their special status as having higher wages and being able to provide for a family, as was traditionally the case. Another way of saying that, just to sum up the outer values thing, is that when your mind's stuck on your outer presentation, that's where you are. You are not focused in on your inner presentation, let's say. So you're basically immature. You're not focused in on anything of depth, or and you wouldn't be able to see that in yourself at the time. You know what I mean? But you probably have a lot of inner insecurity, even if you appear very secure on the outside, even if you're a model or whatever, if that really is your focus, and you weren't, especially if you're traumatized and you weren't, there's so much in depth that can go into this conversation here, but let's just say if that's your greatest value, it is, right? And it's very limiting. And our culture has really focused in on that, obviously, the image. So yeah, there's that. Or I should say there's that as a control mechanism. In that control mechanism, that reduces your power because you're not thinking at a deeper level. You're not participating community at a deeper level. You're not seeing the reality of the world at a deeper level. In other words, there's a certain level of powerlessness to it, even though you have a strong amount of power on that level, on the image level. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, and on the Puritanism level, so I think that's more known through time because of most of our history in this and European Western culture in general. We have had a lot more time to perceive what happens in repression, right? And really strong dogmatic and religious rules-based orders. So, and who that works for and who it does not work for, right? And so, of course, a lot of the movement for the men, the manosphere, and all that is around the loss of that status that happens in those more repressive cultures, right? The whole thing is about repression of the feminine in both men and women, and it's devastating for both men and women, of course. So the control mechanism is a little more obvious, and I don't feel like I have to go into a lot of explanation there. And for curious minds, there's plenty out there around it. It's just that I think with the freshness more of the the freedom crowd and like tantra and the workshop culture and new age culture and everything around intimacy, that's a little fresher in the culture, and of course that's been going on since the 60s. And that's a fascinating show as well because, I think one of the hardest things to grapple with is that, the movement since the 60s and those freedom movements, they did ruin relationship, that had a huge hand to do with it, so it's like we need to face up to that reality just as much as those on the other side, let's say, need to look at how the downfalls of deeper conservatism and where that was also ruinous, right? And so both extremes are really destructive in some way, and yeah. So I'm going off a little bit too much here, but anyway, I hope that helps to present where both sides of the coin are control mechanisms, and where I'm curious as to in looking at that and seeing the extremes we're at, what are your thoughts towards how we find a healthier society? Are you anywhere in the middle? Do you see anything out of these two extremes? What do you think?